Approximately 4.3 million Filipino-Americans were either born in the United States or are reported to have Filipino ancestry. This podcast explores the Filipino diaspora in the U.S., tracing their origin stories and accompanying them on their journeys. The stories shared will reflect the rich diversity of the dialects and subcultures from the 7,641 islands that make up the Philippine archipelago. Some tales will be inspiring, others enjoyable, and a few may even serve as cautionary tales. Welcome to 4 Million Filipinos.
Hey, we are back.
Hey.
I know, today it's really exciting because I get to have a good friend of mine on the show, Steve Raquel.
Yeah.
And I will introduce him in a formal manner. He is a clinical assistant professor at Gies College of Business at the University of Illinois. And he is also president of IOV Media. So welcome to the show, Steve. Yaha!
I brought my barong for Steve. Special occasion.
I could have worn that too, but I want to showcase my university color.
Yeah, he's got to represent, right? So
I'm off to work.
All right.
Sure.
All right. Well, it's good to have you, Steve. And
Thanks.
just a little background. I mean, I think, Steve, we go back way back.
Way back.
How many, like...
90, in like mid-90s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ooh.
We used to work at an agency together back in the day. What's it? Frankel.
Yeah, Frankel.
Yep. Leo Burnett.
You were that.
Yeah.
Which is now part of the
Publicis
Publicis.
group.
That's right.
The power of one.
Exactly. Snoop's
Yep.
agency.
That's right. That's right.
That's right. That's
When
right.
we, back in the day, when we first worked together, I worked on McDonald's account. And,
Hey, I worked at the
Our-
McDonald's
our-
account as well.
but the cool part is that we were trying to install or start the first digital menu board.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
And then
Wow, that takes
you went
me
one
back.
way and I went the other.
That's right. But it was funny because, it's the thing where you see a Filipino in the hallway and you're like, Filipino? Right? And yeah. And so
We had a little billing guy named Bert who's Filipino.
that's right. I forgot about Bert. Oh my gosh. There's a couple Filipinos. There's just like 4 Filipinos at Frankel, I
Yeah.
think.
Yeah.
You can count them on one hand.
Yes.
And we knew
I
who
think
everybody
we were in the
was.
front. I think we were kind of in the more of the front end.
Yes.
A lot more back end.
That's right. Like they were either finance
Yeah.
or HR, right?
Yeah.
And Steve and I were in the agency side.
Yep.
Anyway, so
That's
now
good.
that we kind of know the history, we can start out with let's
Three
talk about
McDonald's
you.
guys. Gee.
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about you, Steve. You are. Let's start with where you were born in the U.S., right? I mean, yep. So
Born
he's like me.
Queens, New York.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, isn't every Filipino from Queens, New York, eventually, or apparently? So,
I don't know.
yep.
Excuse me.
So you born in New York, Queens. Did you early in life? Let's just start out with like, how were you raised? Like, depending upon how your parents raised you, they either raised you as like totally American or anchoring you solely in the Filipino foundation.
Totally American.
Yep.
Totally American. So my dad, funny enough, my dad and my mom were both doctors.
Mm.
Came here. My dad did his residency at JFK. So he was an airport doctor.
Yeah.
And after he finished up his residency, he looked at opportunities to work wherever in the country he wanted to. And his goal, he really wanted an education for his kids. So he only chose cities that had colleges within them. So when we were deciding, or when he was deciding, it was between Champaign-Urbana, right, University of Illinois, or Texarkana. So I don't know what my life would be like if I was growing up a Filipino in the middle of Texas.
In the middle of Texas.
Yeah.
Okay. I think Bing's little network connection in the Philippines got lost, but we can keep going.
Okay.
He's back. There he goes. Yep. So we were just getting to how he got to Chicago, and his dad chose correctly, right? He got him here, and you were raised like. Did they speak Tagalog at the house? I mean, were you?
Let's see. They spoke it to talk to each other,
Yeah,
right?
in front of you, right?
Yeah. And then we got all the curse words.
Yep. So they would do the thing where they talk about you in front of you, so you wouldn't know what they were saying. Yep.
Yeah, my sister was born in Manila, so she understands it a little bit, but she can't speak it.
Yeah.
I can't do either.
Yeah. Even when I lived there, how many years did I live there, Bing? Like 3-4 years when I was
He
working for
dropped out.
Jollibee. We lost him again. He'll come back. But when I was living in Manila working for Jollibee for a while, it was definitely like immersive, but I picked it up toward the end. But it's like if you don't use it every day, you're never going to. But I think my parents, probably like yours, they wanted you to be super American and not kind of carry that accent and things like that. Not that it's a bad thing, but I think back then that generation felt like you had to be 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've learned from my, kind of looking back at my parents, especially my dad, is, he came from a very poor part of the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
So when
what part of the Philippines did he
he
come
was,
from?
he was from Leyte.
Okay.
So little small town kind of north of their capital. And, I really do believe he wanted to escape. He wanted to go somewhere. He also felt like, he had kind of had to prove himself.
Yeah.
So, there was a lot. He was a doctor, is very successful. And in some respects, now I look back at it, is, he used kind of that wealth a little bit to kind of say, hey, you know what? Look, I'm doing great. I've kind of arose from the ashes. Never really thought about that because there's all these, different things about the relationship and stuff growing up that I didn't understand.
Mm-hmm.
As I've grown older, I think I've understand a little bit more.
Yeah. You appreciate it more, right? That's just,
Yeah.
that's usually, I'm the same way. I mean, I don't know. Being,
Yeah.
what do you think?
Well, you do understand your parents as you grow older. Obviously, it's a different cultural background for me because I come from a very tight knit family. We're still in a compound together. Extended family, so I've got brother, and we're still pretty much living together in one compound. So we eat together, do stuff together. So in that sense, yeah. But you're right. You don't understand things as a young person, but as life happens, your
Yeah.
perspective changes a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Was there anything about the Filipino culture that stands out? Like, is that you said you didn't really understand it until you got older, but give me a couple of things that you were kind of like, what's going on?
Well, one was food, right?
Yeah.
Anything about food. My mom was an incredible cook. Things that people would think about when they would see me after years is like, oh, your mom had, great food, all
Yeah.
that stuff.
Did kids make fun of you when you brought Filipino food to school?
Not until they ate it, and then they're like, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Then they're like, hey, let's sit next to Steve.
amazing. I wish, like we all do, I wish I learned how to cook a little bit more Filipino food than I do. At least in a sense that it, I can just kind of whip it up. My mom used to whip it up, right? Just, oh, okay, curry, great.
Mm-hmm.
All right. It was great. Outside of the food, it's weird. I will tell you, when you live in the Midwest in a smaller town, there's a lot of isolation, right? So, for me, compared to Bing, probably you, and from what I'm hearing, there are probably a community of about 300 people, Filipinos in Champaign growing up, and a handful of Filipino children. And it was, I don't, there wasn't this sense of kind of family that I think you get in the Filipino culture, how people take care of each other. My parents absolutely did, but I don't feel like I connected in that way with the other Filipino kids. Like, I'm not, of all the ones that I knew growing up, I'm not very close to them. I also didn't grow up with my siblings, or I'm sorry, I grew up with my siblings, but I get to meet hardly any of my cousins until I went to the Philippines in 1980, so I was 10. And then really right after my dad died, when I had to deal with the whole estate stuff. So
Yeah.
all of a sudden now I'm,
How old were you when he passed?
Well, he passed in 2018.
Okay.
So, I probably knew a little bit more. 1980, I visited more of my mom's side of the family. After 2018, I've gotten to know my dad's side of the family a lot better. So, it's that it's a weird thing knowing that family is such a huge part of the Filipino culture that wasn't like that for me, right? It was my family. It was, our American friends. My parents didn't teach us Tagalog. They wanted us to all marry non-Filipinos.
Mm-hmm.
They all want us to get an education. They didn't want us to try to, be in the medical field, but we all decided that that wasn't for us.
Yeah. They didn't have it. So there was no pressure to be a doctor?
It wasn't pressure. I would say bribing is probably the right. My dad would say, hey, you know what? I'll pay for you to go overseas and, pay for all your med school. I'll make sure you're taken care of. But none of us, again, my dad was an ER doctor. He was gone for long stretches of time. And that just he wasn't very engaged in our family's life compared to my mom. And so I look at it and go, I don't want that. Like, that's not the life I wanted to live. So, I appreciate what he did. I think he was very good at it. My mom was a bedrock. My grandma, when she was here, being the Lola,
Yeah, Lola. Yeah, that's right.
help out, right? All those things play a part of it.
Are you the kuya? Are you the eldest in your family?
No, I'm the third. I have 4 siblings. I'm the third out of 4.
So was that also the pecking order of the ate that was like your second mom kind of a thing? Is that
Yeah,
you
but
experienced that?
it was weird. My grandmother was awesome. Loved her to death. But when you're growing up, and I'm thinking back there, we like treated her like a maid. Like she cleaned,
Yeah.
she washed, folded, made food, did all these different things. So it felt very transactional, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As opposed to feeling like, oh, it's, grandparents taking their kids out and, taking them for a walk or taking them for lunch or anything. And not a lot of that. Just a lot of like, hey, you need to eat? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you need to do this?
That's the first thing they say when you walk in the door. Did you eat yet? Right?
Yeah.
Although I will try to inject a little insight, and this is from the Filipino side, I guess. Let me guess. Your Lola,
Uh-huh.
when she went over there, must have been advanced in her years already, so it was more difficult for her to assimilate, to make friends, particularly in a place where there were not too many Filipinos. And so really the family became her life. And because she couldn't, there was no working outside, everything that she could do to make things easier for you, which you think maybe, all right, yeah, that'll be the labor stuff and all. That was really her way of making herself useful, or getting involved in a community outside of herself, because it must be difficult for a rather old person to just move into something, a new context, new environment, where everybody and everything is new to you.
Right.
Yep. It's the
Yeah,
love language, right?
it
That's the
is.
Lala love language.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I think, a mom needs her mom, right? A
Yeah,
woman needs
yeah.
her mom. And my mom spoke fine English, but she always felt like she didn't want to. Like, she was kind of embarrassed. And so, having somebody who she could talk to and converse and have a relationship with, I think was really important for her as well.
That makes sense.
I wanted to just add, because you were born there already, and you said that a small place, there was not much of the Filipino culture around you, because there were not too many kids. But and I hope I'm not I don't know how to say this, but when Manolo shared that video of you uh, teaching, and then you had to carry that kid, to me that just said, that's classic Pinoy stuff. Going That is classic Pinoy, in a sense. Not that I'm saying that other cultures wouldn't do it, but it's just the Pinoy thing to do, the very Filipino thing to do. And I say that only because I've heard these stories, whether it's seafarers or healthcare professionals. it's always of that Filipino part of us wanting to go do the extra step, go do the extra step, go the extra mile, and just do something beyond what is written in your contract. That's why I say, Filipinos will probably be very, very poor union workers. They'd say, yeah, I can help you
Yeah,
out
right.
over there. Yeah, let me help you out with that too.
Yeah, I think my parents valued education, but they definitely instilled a sense of caring. Just a deep down caring
Yeah,
of people,
I
whether
was
you
really
like them.
happy when I saw that. Wow,
So yeah, great. And holding the baby, I think was just a great opportunity.
Well, let's
Yeah,
back up a bit because, like, for the listeners, they don't really know what we're talking about. I will embed the video when we release this, but
sure.
can you give us like the intro of what happened?
Yeah, no, I'd been teaching at the U of I for a number of years, and I had one student who was a senior who was a single mother or single mother to be. And she had the baby, and I had a class I taught, which was 3 hours. And she, the first time, she, reached out and said, "Hey, I can't come. I can't find a babysitter." I said, "That's okay. Just come. I'll take care of the baby." And so that's what ended up happening. Fortunately, I carried the baby, which was great, except it just wrecked my shoulder. Like a month later, she, reached out and said, "Hey, I can't come. I don't have a babysitter." And I said, "You know what? Come, bring a baby carrier next time." That worked out great, and I told her, I go, "I don't care if you sleep. I don't care if you're here. I'm taking care of this baby for the next 3 hours. So just whatever you need to do, just do." Right. And it was just between me and her. I didn't share that with anybody else. But, my mom was an incredible caring person, right? And I think that's kind of what motivated me a little bit, and just, being empathetic to
Yeah,
people's situations. So I think Filipinos definitely have that empathy, like high empathy.
Yeah,
yeah.
So
that's a trait that I think we can claim.
All right. Well, let me just go a bit from that experience. You're a teacher there. Well, you were a teacher at another school. Right now, you're what they call a
always been at UI.
okay. Okay. You are called a clinical professor, and for the life of me, and I'm really dumb in this way. What is a clinical professor?
So there are teaching professors, there are tenured professors. A lot of academia have people who teach who really are focused in on research. And so they get their PhD and then they go teach. They don't do a lot of outside work. They don't work for an agency. They don't do that. What a clinical typically means is you are a clinician. So you apply the things that you've done in the world into the topics that you teach. So with me, with more than 25 years of marketing, advertising, and promotion, I bring that into teaching in the Gies College of Business as I teach digital marketing classes, marketing essential classes, Marcom, and I do that from undergrad all the way through the MBA program. So I get the opportunity to say, somebody says, "Hey, I understand how this concept works." And I'll say, "Well, you know what? I worked for McDonald's for many years. Here's one of the examples where this came into play, and this is how we do that." Right? No knock on academics who do research. It's just an opportunity for, I think, some additional insight that kind of complements the theory that tends to
Yeah.
be a lot. Right?
Real world teaching.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, that's
That's
exactly
great.
it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I was telling Manolo that I'm really happy that we've got you as someone that we're talking to today, because for people like me who are not living there, the context whenever we get exposed to Filipino-American stories, it's usually about achievements of the individual. Let's say in the world of culture, so it's about we're getting the chefs, it's individual talent. You're getting a lot of the Jokoy stuff, so it's about individual achievement, and it's usually in a field that's close to approaching celebrity, where we're in that sense, but not too many, or the celebrity entrepreneur, we're championing that individualism. But coming from a corporate background, we aren't hearing too many stories of Filipino Americans who've made it in the corporate background. Filipino Americans have made it in the academic background. And here's what's strange: you're actually doing both. You're crossing over every day, both corporate and academia. You're overachieving. So what is it like? You're setting the bar too high.
That's Steve. He is an overachiever.
Yeah. What now that there's more and more, I guess there's more of the spotlight being shown on Filipinos, because the food is now getting more known. The Filipino talent is now getting more known.
It's a Filipino moment, isn't it?
Yes. I mean, I've been exposed to that. That's what I'm hearing on media. And forget the bad news aside, but this is the Filipino moment in a sense. Is it do for those who are thinking of of their own path in the United States? Is it now a better time for you for people to work in the corporate world, to work in academia, and the usual? What can you say? How do they get to be just like Steve?
Well, that's a loaded question. I'll do my best, but I think I would start out talking about my daughter, my oldest daughter, Kate, lives in New York. She works for Google. She got a American degree at Illinois and Gies. And, we talk constantly, and I ask her about her business and what she does. And,
Well, that's Filipino. You're still Filipino, man.
Yeah, but, we have a good relationship. The things that I hear from her compared to my experience growing up is she immediately jumped into the Filipino-American kind of group at Google.
Mm-hmm.
She connects with other Filipinos there. There are a lot more Filipinos there. She helped me, I'm trying to take a group of students to Manila this summer, study abroad, and she helped coordinate for me to go visit the Google offices there.
Great.
So for her...
Hey, sorry, guess what? You don't have to search for it. I'm just kidding. Bad
no.
joke.
And I say this because, I feel like my daughter, who is really embracing kind of her diversity, she's half American or half Caucasian and half Filipino. She really embraces her Filipino side. And she's found a lot more outlets than I would have.
Mm-hmm.
Makes sense. And so I'm glad for her. And she's gone to the Philippines a number of times and talks to her cousins. And so for her, it's interesting. It's kind of like a jump to generation, right? So my parents totally Filipino, I was totally American, and now my kids are like, hey, you know what? I want to go to the Philippines. I want to do all these things, and she's trying to learn Tagalog, right? So for her, it's a better launching pad, much more comfortable, right? Compared to, I would think I was when I came into the world where there wasn't a lot of Filipinos and you're just trying to survive. I think we're all trying to survive, right?
Well, how did you bring yourself, like, we asked you earlier, it's like your parents are in the medical field. Like, what made you say, I want to get into marketing? Like, how did that happen?
You know what? There are a number of different ways I can answer it. I just happened to just go in advertising. That's kind of it
wasn't a plan. You just said, I'll try.
Well, I started out in kinesiology, right?
Kinesiology.
Yeah, the study of body movement, right? And that was supposed to get me to med school. And then I was like, I don't get this stuff. I wanted to transfer into architecture, and I transferred into communications, and then I transferred ultimately in advertising. And so that's kind of where I ended up. So, and it worked out for me. I've had a great 25 years. I've been teaching since 2014. And it's been an interesting transition because, and I'm glad I'm in a clinical because I can still have my feet wet in the industry. And I worried about that a little bit, but here's the great part for me, is, I've been teaching for 2014. I'm heavily invested in my students. I mean, that's one of the things I can say about how I teach. Heavily invested ever since I started. So, starting in 2014, I built kind of a couple of private groups on Facebook and LinkedIn and invited all my former students there. And I said, hey, when you first start, just take. But understand 2 or 3 years from now, I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to need your help. And everybody kind of worked on the rule. So imagine 10 years later, with 2,500 students and my ability now to go, hey, I'm going to teach this class. I'm teaching digital marketing in the fall. In the spring or right in the beginning of the summer, I'll email all my digital marketer students and I go, hey, look at the syllabus. What am I not teaching? Or what could I teach about? Or hey, come in and guest lecture. Or could you do a Zoom? Could you talk to a student for me? And so that network, that kind of ecosystem I've built has been incredibly helpful, both for me, but also to these students who are now, in very high levels of places all over the place.
Paying it forward.
Yeah, definitely paying it forward, right? I've also seen a lot more Filipino students on campus. I've seen them.
Do they seek you out? Like, hey, that's that Filipino professor.
The Filipino Association on campus hosted me to be part of a panel. So panel with another one of my friends. It was great. And so from there, some of them were Gies students. Like, I didn't know you were a professor. I'm going to take your class. So, it works out. And then on top of that, I'm trying to take students to go to the Philippines. So kind of expanding those type of things.
Yep. And now you can lean on Bing to pick you up at the airport and take you everywhere.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. That is my
it's interesting though, because you know what? Your daughter's third generation now. Yeah. So the first generation goes in cold, and then in a sense, as you were saying, it's an escape. You want to escape the hardship or whatever. So, and then you accomplish that really by being, as you say, more fully American. And then third generation comes in and she brings it back in, and now she's getting two worlds now, essentially. Yeah. Is that I want to ask both of you guys, is that a typical story that the first generation goes in there, wants to escape, whatever? Let's call it poverty, whatever the situation is. You want to start a fresh, new context. The second generation, you guys embrace that, fully become more American, and then your children now.
Yeah, to me, the way I would is yes. I mean, again, as a second generation or first generation fully in America, the goals of my parents were good education, recognized as possible. I don't think they outwardly said, I want you to be Filipino or identify Filipino, but they wanted their kids to succeed in a way that they didn't, right?
Exactly.
And so that's how I look at it. I don't know about you, Manolo.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very similar. I mean, I think that it's the generation. The first generation, our parents that came over wanted a better life for us. That's why we're here, right? And then I think during the time, the generation, the way people thought about things, maybe it's going back to that now where you don't want to stand out. You want to blend in. You don't want to be, there's a lot of, I'm sure, Steve, and I'm going to ask you this, is like, did you run into any racism? I'm sure you did. I did when we were growing up. And I'm sure I know for a fact, my parents, when they first got here, is like, you have to be careful. People are going to single you out. You're going to get picked on because you're brown. Now it's full circle now, right? But I think our kids, as Steve's saying, is like, I think they are now looking and saying, you know what, I want to get back to that. I want to understand that part of my life, because I'm not as Filipino as my parents were. Like Steve was saying, it's the food. The food started me. And I think as I got older, I did want to learn more. And I think that's what our kids are looking at now.
Out of my 4 siblings, right, I have worked really hard to reconnect with my Filipino past.
Mm-hmm.
When my dad died, my mom died in 2008. My dad died in 2008. 18. And then there was a whole bunch of like estate issues, right, that we had to do both here in the United States and in the Philippines. And I had the appetite to do that, right, to take care of that and to learn and to go through the process. And it took more than 2 years. And, was able to kind of reconcile everything. And I've gotten an incredible, appreciation for all the things that my parents did. And to answer your question about growing up, like I say, I was pretty stupid, right? So I grew up, I don't, two things happened. One is if people were racist to me, I really, to be honest, I couldn't like pinpoint that, were people probably racist to me? Yeah, absolutely. Did I date a lot? No. People didn't want to date.
We're going to drill into that too. So.
And what was the thing I was going to say? So, but here's the thing is if you talk to all my friends, right, today from college and high school, I have one of my best friends, we'll talk and he goes, I don't look at you as Filipino. I just look at you as Steve. Like I Americanized myself so much that the color of my skin kind of went away, right? And so more people kind of just treated me as one of the guys, right? And so that was a benefit for me. And there were other Filipinos, in college and stuff like that. But, for example, one of the reasons I joined the fraternity I did, because there were other Filipinos in that fraternity. Right?
Me too.
So,
yeah.
So there was a little bit of that. And they really actively recruited me. Like, hey, you're a Filipino. Oh my gosh, you should be in our fraternity.
Right.
And,
it wasn't a DEI thing, right? It was
no.
It didn't exist back then. It didn't exist back then.
I didn't know how to play volleyball. So they had a strong volleyball team. So I was like, and so I feel like I kind of live both a little bit.
Yeah.
And I see myself just with my friends and people who know me, I never feel like they look at me and my skin color or my background and say he's less than or he's different than.
That's good. I mean, I think that's also where you learn you have to build that community. Like you talked about building your community, but also having those friends around you that are looking at you like that's Steve, right? That's not that brown guy, Steve, right? Let me circle back because you made me think of something. Bing is living the life of leisure. He's a single man around town. I mean, I've had many a night when I lived in the Philippines where I just was living vicariously through him as he was singing karaoke with the very sexy, beautiful singers and stuff. So, I mean, I look at that and I say...
And you were dancing.
Yeah, by myself.
No. All right,
but,
okay.
But I think, that's another thing that it's not like I wanted to get out of my Filipino foundation, but I never was really attracted to Filipino women because they reminded me of my cousins. Like it didn't work for me. Like I never found that.
Yeah.
Now,
I agree.
Yeah.
I will tell you, my sister, it's absolutely stunning. She's beautiful. I mean, she just celebrated a birthday, older than me. But she is one of the most beautiful people I think I know, and she's both inside and out. And I would tell you, like, I don't want to date any Filipinos because you remind me of my sister, right? And even in college, where I probably like went on dates with a couple of Filipinos, I just would not pursue it. Right? I just wouldn't.
Yeah, I that is my theory. I think everyone I talk to that has been raised like you and me has the same story.
All right.
It fills in the blanks for me saying, okay, it wasn't just a thing. So yes, and so
Let me extend this a bit then, because
okay.
Because three of us, I suppose, we're all in our 50s right now. So we're now at that age where we're looking at
Yeah, but we don't look it because we're brown and we're Filipino.
Of course not. Of course not. Of course not. All right.
Asians raised.
And I'll ask you this because I'm beginning to see some of my cousins who are over there.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, second generation, just like you, and they're beginning to spend more time here in the Philippines. particularly if they've got property or they've got a house. And mind you, their folks have already passed, but it's a way of reconnecting, I suppose, with their past, with their families. They're not looking to stay there. I don't see all of them staying here for the rest of their lives, but it's definitely a part of their schedule. For one, it's every few months. For another, it's every year, every 2 years, whatever. But the fact is, there's a regularity now in these returns. Do you see yourself or other Filipinos, second gen, also thinking about reconnecting more and more? I ask that simply because it's an extension of that dating Filipino women, but also because in your case, Steve, you had an opportunity to look at your family estate, your inheritance or your properties, and I'm sure you still have. Both of you still have properties over the years. So, in a sense, there is that land that ties you
Well,
to the
which is
Philippines.
interesting because, when you get down to what the piece of property looks like, you're kind of wondering, like, what's the fuss? Right? It's it's just that there's
But
nothing
there's
on it,
still, yeah.
right? But it's very, like property, I realize, is so important to
Yeah.
Filipinos and crazy, right? And the tax laws and the taxes and the ownership and the
And the fights that
distribution.
ensue, over the ownership.
Yeah. Well, so to answer your question, I I I think it's the same. I didn't go to Europe until last year for the first time, right? So that tells you anything. There is there was a mental limitation for me to make going overseas a priority, right?
Mm.
I have everything I need in America. Why would I need to? I don't really know anybody in the Philippines. Why would I go? So, you know, it wasn't until I went in 2022 um, to the Philippines. Actually, my oldest daughter joined me, and that was a journey of kind of unpacking my background, right?
Wow.
Meeting
I love
my,
the way that you said that.
engaging with my cousins on my mom's side, on looking at the, estate that my mother owned or grew up in São Paulo, and then seeing where my dad grew up, all of those things, and then starting to reestablish ties into those communities to the point now that I went back this past October, and things are much easier, right? Both getting there, getting around,
Except for the airport.
except for the airport, right? um, and all that fun stuff, right? There's also, I have to say, and this is not necessarily related to me, is I think Instagram and TikTok and just all these visual based platforms have done a service for the Philippines, because now you have influencers and people who are sharing how awesome and incredible it is. Go to Korong, go to Bohol, go to all these places, right? And and people see that and they go, oh, you know what? It can be cheap. It looks like it's a really great time. People seem like they're really great, and all those things get reinforced, right? You get there, people take care of you. It's really cheap. It's absolutely beautiful. And that spreads. And I'm okay with it. I mean, I honestly, I'm okay with it. So, to me, I feel like just kind of what you said, Manolo, earlier is like the Philippines in a weird sort of way is coming into a renaissance in my mind. Is more Filipinos are here. We call them hoppers or hapsies, right? One parent is Filipino, the other one is not. One's Filipino, one's not. And and I would say the output is great. My daughters are beautiful, right?
Yeah.
And I could say that for almost every kind of mixed marriage. And now, where I didn't really date much, right, is, people are seeking out this kind of mix. And that's what I see, at least.
Yeah.
And so, it's less, we are a culture now that's a little bit more flexible about who we date and colored skin and all that fun stuff. And I think it's amazing, right? And on top of that, then you have Joy,
Jokoy.
Joy, right?
That's
Yeah.
right.
when he came on the scene, I felt like he spoke to me, right? And he both knew the American experience, but he also made fun of the Filipino experience. Me and my siblings, absolutely love him and, relate to him. And then, you have, all the other, other Hasi Filipinos and, as we know, anytime we think there's a Filipino, we'll point that person out, right? And it's a point of pride.
That's a game we play too,
right?
Yeah. We like to call them hybrids. Halvesies is a good one too, right? But
I like what because it's an extension again, and I'm talking about. I guess I'm supposed to bring in the Filipino stuff here. Over here, what I like to do is, so over there you like to point out, okay, is this guy Filipino or not? Over here, being Cebuano speaking, being Bisaya, just like people from Dumaguete, Manolo, and even from I suppose if you're from Leyte, we sort of understand each other. So I'm always trying to pick by the accent. Okay, is this person Bisaya speaking also? So if they are, and then I ask, are you from this place or that, or do you speak Cebuano? Are you Bisaya? And then when they say they are, I just light up because in a sense there's that closer there's that relationship to be made or that connection to be made. Well, I'm glad to hear that over there. You're also wondering, okay, is this guy Filipino as well? Because I think it's who we are. We want to
Well,
make a connection.
I'll tell you a quick story about growing up, and this goes back to being Filipino. One of the things that being a physician's kid is we would go to the conferences. So we would go to a thing called APPPA, which is American, practicing Filipino, blah, blah, blah of America. And it was every year. And it would always be kind of in these big cities, hotels and stuff like that. That was my major exposure to the Filipino culture. But as you can imagine, a lot of them were rich, spoiled kids and, grew up and
privileged.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did not like that. Like my parents, raised me to do that. But so there's a little bit of me that kind of shunned a little bit of this is what Filipinos are like. I really don't want that, right? Taking the flip side, you guys may laugh at this, is when my dad died, I was talking to my cousins and saying, hey, I need to do all this stuff. They go, you know what, Steve? The one thing you have to realize is you can't trust a Filipino. You can't trust family, right? And I was just like one of those, like, you are my family. He goes, yeah, but you just trust me. Like there are people who have their own self-interest in doing that. As kind as nice they can be, there's this kind of, not necessarily a group of people, but
there's a subset.
There tends to, a subset of people who don't have your best interests, right?
Always.
So
yes.
that was also a part of growing up and like learning about the industry is like, can I trust this person? Do I not? Do I, I'd heard so many bad stories.
I trusted you when I met you, Steve.
Thanks. Think about it. I went to my mom's when my dad died and I needed a lawyer, right? My mom's godmother was an ambassador from the Philippines throughout the world. Contacted her and she goes, I have a classmate who's a lawyer. You could use her. You could trust her. And I'm just thinking, okay, I have to trust somebody.
Right.
Yeah.
I got to trust somebody. I'm going to trust this person. And it turned out to be incredibly great, like absolutely great. But I had heard from people, can you trust that person? Like, you're sending a lot of money to that person. Are you sure they're not going to, take off with it? So it's this weird, I don't know, Bing, what it's like in the Philippines, if that's a subculture or not. I just grew up, in a lot of ways, just trusting people that, that's kind of it. And all of a sudden I've been introduced to this, like, not so often.
Well, unfortunately, that is also present simply because it's also the reality of a society that you have a lot of people who are also in need. So part of it, I wish I could say that a lot of it is just pure evil, but it's not. A lot of it is really born out of the fact that a lot of people just don't have for whatever reason, but there's a need, and that's really led some people to be less trustworthy. Let me just put it that way. But yeah,
I
unfortunately.
100% agree with you, all of you. I mean, I think there's even better or worse is family will do this to you, right? That's the thing.
Yes.
Like you would think it just a stranger or somebody to introduce you to, but I have family that has screwed us over many times, or taken the money and done something else with it, right?
Right.
There's a reason why there are these, when you send money over, you send it in a way that they can't do anything else with it except for what it's expressly meant for. That's a whole service behind that. But
Yep.
Steve, you're
Yep. Yep. Yep.
100% right. I think, and Bing, you nailed it. It's an opportunistic situation. Like it's a dire situation, and it's a developing country, but there's the really rich folks who are the privileged ones that like to keep the really poor folks down, right? I know I'm probably going to get a lot of comments about this, but no, it's the way it is. Like, let's just face it. And so people that are trying to like claw their way up, there's a reason why they say the Filipinos have a crab mentality. You're climbing on top of the other person to get to the top. Now, granted, if Steve and I have been privileged to live in the United States, our parents brought us here, so our mentality is not like that. You got to make it over there, so you'll do anything you want, especially with a family. So yeah, I'm not saying it's an excuse. I'm saying I understand it, but I'm glad Steve kind of called it out, because it's a real thing. It's a thing.
It is.
For
It
sure.
is. It is. And I
Yeah.
guess it's more real for for people coming in from a richer economy. Let's just put it that way. It becomes more pronounced as an experience for Filipino Americans simply because one, your money means your money equals more. Secondly, there's also the perception that you've got much, 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 way much more. Whether it's true or not, I'm just talking in general. Whether it's true or not, there's that perception. So yeah, that makes you a target at times.
Yep. For sure. For sure.
Wow,
Hey,
wow.
listen, I'm looking at the time because we have to keep this within the hour. So I want to
I
give
know.
Steve, right? I mean, we could talk all night. I mean,
Yes.
that's why I love doing this. And I actually learned a lot about Steve that I didn't know, right? We've been friends for a long time, but I learned his like Filipino story today. So that was a great thing for me. And I appreciate you coming on the show, Steve. But let's talk about, like, in closing, we kind of heard your origin story. We heard how you got to where you are and how successful you became. And then you reconnecting with your Filipino roots, and the fact that you and I, not that Filipino women, let me clarify, Filipino women are beautiful, right? Our mothers were beautiful,
Definitely.
are beautiful.
Definitely.
Our families beautiful. But so don't get us wrong, but we just, because I think how we were raised, we don't go after that. Like, I married a white woman too, right? That's just the way it is. And so, and every one of my cousins that lived in the United States, I'd say 90% of them married a white person. So it's just the way it is. Sorry.
Bruce
Steve, what
Hornsby.
do you, yeah, that's the way it is. You do so much for your communities. You teach. If you were going to kind of give here's my advice, wide sage advice of all the experiences in your life, what would you tell Filipino Americans, like how to make it in the world?
Can I just qualify that? Are we talking
Yes,
about fresh off the boat Filipino Americans or Filipino Americans second gen just like you?
I think let's Steve pick, like, because I think
Yeah, yeah.
it's either or, because they're
Yeah.
different.
Yeah, they are.
Advice on how to what to succeed
Succeed in the United States as a Filipino American in today's world.
in today's world. So, I told you the story about my daughter, my oldest,
Mhm.
and um, you know, I think education continues to be an important part of it. Now, it doesn't
Absolutely.
mean like there are plenty of people who are not going to get education and be successful. I think a lot of it is embracing that difference that we have and being like, you know what, this is what I can bring to the table. Here's why I'm unique. And really leaning in on that. I do absolutely believe in investing in people. And when you invest in people, they invest
That's true.
back. You're going to benefit from that, right? I don't think, even when it doesn't happen, I think that's so important. And I've seen that just the way, my focus is on teaching. The other part about teaching is this: I want to be the best that I can, right? And so investing a lot in learning and being correct and accommodating in some respects and being able to just be that voice, be that guide. That's one of the things I get to do as a professor, right? And I'm very aware of that is they leave me, right? And they know the world. And we always talk about like the reputation of a college is really based off of the quality of the graduate. And so if I'm not teaching them the right stuff, well, not challenging them in the right way, if I'm not encouraging them to see kind of what the bigger picture is, and finding tools, that's kind of my thing is learning tools.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't do that, then I'm not getting them to the full potential, right? And so I don't think it's any different than how I treat a non-Filipino, but I think if anything, for those who are Filipino, I do invite them to, reconnect with their history and their roots.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I stood at the corner of my dad's ancestral home and looked around, and all of a sudden it dawned on me, I'm like, I understand why my dad's my dad, right? I understand now why he left there to Manila to become a doctor, to do all the things. His love language was money.
Mm-hmm.
All these things. And all of a sudden it was just like, whoa, right? It opened my eyes, and it helped me to kind of reconcile a lot of things, both good and bad, right? And so it's helped me. I love the fact now that my family wants to share in that background. We're hoping to all go this summer if we can. So that's what I tell you.
Nice. Oh, you know what I forgot to ask you is like, how does your wife adapt to the Filipino culture? Before you say something, I know how my wife has totally embraced it. Like she'll cook Filipino food. Like she's more Filipino than I am at this point. I don't know. How does
Yes.
No, I don't think so. I think my wife has an incredible appreciation. She loved my mom. I absolutely love my mom. And so I think she is a healthy respect for that. I think, she allows me to express myself. Like the other day, because I was sick, I made myself a lugaw, right?
Yeah. Ooh.
Kind of like she didn't.
Yeah.
Kind of looked at me like, okay, do what you do.
That's
right. And, and she's okay with that. Right. I think that's just, it's funny because she's from, like, her background is French, Nordic, kind of English, kind of that. I'm Filipino. And so there's my kids kind of go, man, we're like a mutt, like stuff.
That's the best kind.
Sorry, I'm trying to, what happened here? I know we have some limited time, but I wanted to discuss something that somebody had told me, or I experienced, and then somebody had told me when I was in the Philippines. So, and Bing, you can tell me if this is true or not, but we were driving, right? We were basically driving to Mall of Asia, right?
Okay.
And then, all
on the way to the airport, I suppose.
Well, from Makati to Mall, right? And taking the highway. Anyway, you go through a lot of billboards and signs of things and stuff like that. And all of a sudden I looked up there, and what I noticed consistently is the women that were in there were lighter skin.
Yeah.
Right. Yes. And so, I asked around, and somebody told me, he goes, you know what? If you consider the Philippines a caste system, right? You're Filipino. The top of the line is marrying an American woman. You're looked at as top, right?
You've made it.
American woman. Then you have to get a light-skinned Asian, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if you go from there, then it's like a light-skinned Chinese or Japanese or Korean. And then from there, it's in a sense like your normal Filipino. And at the bottom is the dark-skinned Filipino. And, that person had said, yeah, people spend a lot of money to lighten their skin, right? And I was like, to be kidding. Like, my daughter has that. I looked up, I go, Kate, all these pictures look like you. Like, I don't get it. And then when somebody explained to me, I go, seriously, like, really? Like, you're considered not very well off if you've married somebody who looks just like you, right?
Okay.
So
I
I
will
love the feedback.
I will approach that, but talking to you as communications professionals. We all
Okay.
come from that perspective.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Here's my take on that thing. Media wise, all of our stuff has really been very westernized. So our concept, movies, everything, these are all, most of us have, what's shown have really been, all of the leading ladies have all really been mestizas, half seasons, as you said earlier, mestizas, chinitas, which is half Chinese looking, or so half and half. And then you say that those are great blends. So the blended race, so we've gotten that, and because that's the prevalent cultural product, that's the dominant cultural product. These are your ideas of beauties. You go to agency world here as well. You're not gonna see too many dark skinned image models as well. So that's the way that we've been taught to think, that by our media product, by our cultural product. But that's evolving also, because if you're to look at it just from the just from the more and more of our, the beauty contestants we send out, we've been bringing out more and more of these Filipino, the dark skinned ones now.
Yeah.
So part of it really is, I'm not so sure whether it's a society, it's a case thing as well, because I'd like to see it as also really it's as a challenge to us in the communications world, in the media world. We've really got to be able, and I'll also challenge for the fact that it's very, very Metro Manila centric. So we've got a
Mm.
singular view of things that we're perpetuating.
Yeah.
I'm not, and that's where, in our limited way here, we've got to have some more diversity. The over there, you've got, let's say, for the longest time, we had a predominantly Caucasian or white culture, that you're now, it's now beginning to open up, diversify. Here, I'd say there's also a predominantly Metro Manila based culture and way of thinking that we really have to diversify. Again, as the intro said, we're 7,641 islands, so many dialects, and yet the prevalent thought has really been pretty much of the Metro Manila environment. I think, Manolo, you know this from having worked here. Everyone is a classmate of someone.
Yeah.
Your schoolmates. It's a very small clique, and it's not necessarily healthy. So that's what I'd like to see as well. And you're right for particularly pointing that out. We seem to, having said that, several years ago, it's not just a Filipino thing; it's an Asian thing as well. The skin whitening industry, that beauty segment of the industry, is experiencing amazing growth, and it continues to
Yep.
grow because I don't know, and this whole notion of whitening yourself, that's not just a Filipino thing. Uh, it's across Asia.
Yeah. Yep. But it's
The,
a
the,
thing. It's a real
it's a
thing.
thing. It is a real thing. I've read, I'm not sure whether it was a Fortune magazine article from years back, and they were saying that the Koreans finally picked up so they're trying to trace this whole, the boy band K-pop thing, and the insight really was driven by this. The Koreans said, why are they buying so many American products and brands? And then they came to the conclusion, heck, because they see it in the movies and on TV, and it's embedded in the culture. So there was a very deliberate, according to that business magazine article, there was a very deliberate move to really improve and make Korean culture, music popular, and television and movies. And right now, you're seeing it already. Following what follows that, it's the growth of these brands as well. So they're now paying big money advertising because they've got a global audience. So in that sense, if you're exporting culture as and successfully as the way that the United States has, your success in the your economic success follows. So right now we're seeing that, but also we're now beginning to see that, hey, some of these Asian economies are now picking up on that, and they're pretty much doing the same thing. So I don't know, man. Who knows? Maybe one
Yeah.
of these days, at the rate we're
Blame it on
exporting,
advertising. That's all you got to say.
That-
We
that's-
all built our careers there. Yep. All right,
right.
Steve, I'm going to give you the last word here. I know that you have a social media presence. You want to kind of tell everyone where they can follow you and
Yeah.
find you
Sure.
before we let you loose?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I am on TikTok too. And then, I think
What's your TikTok handle? I forgot.
that's a good question. I think it's TikTok Dad. But I might be Illini Dad. Let me double
Yeah.
check.
I think it's Illini Dad, something like that.
It's wrong. I didn't delete it when it was supposed to be.
Yeah,
Illini Dad. It's Illini.
Illini Dad on
Yeah.
TikTok.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The great part is my daughters and some of my cousins have done really well in the media space, and so I'll send you a TikTok of that went pretty viral about Asian food or Asian experiences at holidays. So,
Awesome. It was great. Thank you so much for spending time on the show. I really appreciate it. I learned a lot about your background, which is very similar to mine. So it's nice to hear. All right, my friend. Thanks for joining us today. And thank you all our listeners. And I hope you enjoyed today's show.
Thanks, everybody.